Okay, everyone, we're going to talk a little about the Supreme Court. Not going to talk too long because I have a few other things to do. I am going to do a stream on Heavy Arms Kai's channel later. We're going to have the Patreon stream, basically. Hold on. There we go. So I wrote a quick guide on it. It's below in the description. You can see it's the quick guide to the June head-exploding SCOTUS decisions. Please let me know what you think. We have so first of all, I do go through the difference between loose construction and strict construction. You know, the originalists versus the activist judges. So, of course, an originalist believes that the Constitution should be interpreted with an eye to the original intent of the writers. You know, James Madison being foremost among them, but you know, of course, there was Hamilton and Jefferson and the other founding fathers. Yes, founding fathers, not founding figures. And anyway, so that's what an originalist is. An activist judge, or a loose constructionist, as they're also called, believes that the Constitution is a living, breathing document, meaning that it must be adapted to the times when the new judges are on the court. The best examples of those are people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was a Clinton appointee to the court, Sonia Sotomayor, who was Obama's appointment, I think in 2011 or 2012. Then you had Elena Kagan. I don't remember which one was first. It might have been Kagan was first, and then it was Sotomayor. Elena Kagan is a little more of a moderate loose constructionist, a more moderate activist judge. And the more originalist judges would be Clarence Thomas, the late Antonin Scalia, who was considered, you know, people were like, oh, Antonin Scalia, the greatest ever. I mean, look, he's a judge. Then, I mean, don't make him into, like, you know, some sort of messiah figure or something. Nowadays you have Clarence Thomas and Neil Gorsuch are the big strict constructionists. Then you have people who are, you know, somewhere on the spectrum between the two. So you have John Roberts and you know, Anthony Kennedy was a pretty big moderate who has just retired. So I go through that, and I go through all the decisions. So Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission was 7-2 in favor of Jack Phillips, who was the owner of the cake shop. That one is very famous. What people misunderstand is that it does not strike down anti-discrimination laws or necessarily legalize the denial of service for people, you know, on the basis of sexual orientation or whatever. So I'm not saying that you should support either side. I'm not saying which side is right or wrong. I'm just saying what the court said. In reality, all it refers to is that the Colorado Civil Rights Commission was a failure in mandating its own decision because it explicitly attacked Phillips's religious views. So they violated his civil rights by bringing his religion into the decision instead of supposedly defending the civil rights of I believe the original plaintiff might have been the gay couple. So that's the real decision there. Not that you're allowed to not bake a cake for a gay couple, which, again, we're not discussing that here, whether you agree with it, whether you don't agree with it. We're discussing what the court decided. And the court decided that the Civil Rights Commission violated the owner's civil rights by bringing its own bias into its decision. Then you have Gill versus Whitford and Benesick versus Lamone. Those are gerrymandering cases. Gerrymandering is when you redistrict congressional seat or whatever it might be in order to favor one party or another. I guess the opponents of gerrymandering, who are typically Democrats, lost in those cases. So, and then there was another one in Ohio very recently about cleaning the voter rolls. I didn't include it in this one because I didn't want this to be the longest SCOTUS blog. You know, this is a quick explanation. Then one that I think both sides would probably agree with, Murphy versus NCAA, legalized interstate gambling. That was 7-2 as well. Okay, so the gerrymandering cases, by the way, were a 9-0 decision. So you can't complain about the conservative court motivating, legalized gerrymandering. In fact, it just said, well, we're going to kick the decision back to the lower court, which probably validated the gerrymandering. And that's it. So you can't claim, oh, this is because of Neil Gorsuch and Trump stealing the appointment from Obama, which, by the way, that's the other thing that people are yelling about, that the Senate did not appoint Obama's last appointee, Merrick Garland, in 2016 because they hated him, Mitch McConnell, because he hated Barack Obama so much, he didn't appoint Merrick Garland. He didn't even have a vote on it. And therefore, the Supreme Court is basically racist, and Garland's seat was stolen. These are the same Democrats that claim, well, you can't really steal a job from anyone when you're talking about immigration or anything. So, it's faulty logic. I would say that Garland, to be honest with you, I don't think he would have passed that year. The Republicans could have simply said, well, we're going to vote against it. So, it was an election year appointment, and the Senate said no, and therefore the first Supreme Court justice that Trump appointed, Neil Gorsuch, people say that his seat was stolen on the court. Well, in a decision like Gill versus Whitford, where it was 9-0 against the plaintiffs, well, so did they steal Ginsburg's seats too? I mean, Ginsburg and Sotomayor and Kagan, who are the more liberal people on the bench, and Breyer, by the way. I think Stephen Breyer is considered a little more liberal than well, not as liberal as Ginsburg, but pretty liberal. And by the way, these people, they don't necessarily always rule by activist or originalist viewpoints. So I mean, once in a while, one of them breaks with their usual pattern. Once in a while. I know with Clarence Thomas, the big thing has been civil asset forfeiture. He's been a huge opponent of that. And there are plenty of conservative frauds that think civil asset forfeiture is fine. So he's pretty much stood up for his own principles on that one. Then you have Trump versus Hawaii. That's a huge one, which was the travel ban one that his opponents called the Muslim ban. That one was decided by a 5-4 narrow decision. NIFLA versus Becerra, which was the abortion clinic that was forced by the state of California to put flyers or other material that indicate to somebody that, a woman coming in, or I guess a man with a uterus. That's the other thing that, supposing a person, a transgender man who still has a uterus, would become pregnant and want to have an abortion. So that's what I have to say nowadays because of the ridiculous state of our world. But let's say one of these people came in and they wanted to plan their family at this non-abortion having clinic, which specifically does not believe in abortion. This clinic would still have to post, but requirement by California law, they would have to post literature or flyers or banners or posters or something explicitly showing a location or a hotline or whatever to tell the clients where to have an abortion. So that was again 5-4 in favor of NIFLA against California Attorney General Xavier Becerra. I don't know if he pronounces it one way or the other. So that is once again, people are portraying that as an attack on abortion, an attack on women's right to choose. It actually has very little to do. It's the same as the Masterpiece Gate decision, which was an example of compelled speech. And even in that case, the court made a narrow ruling. But in this case, think about it this way. The court decided that these family clinics do not have to be forced to advertise for a service that they disagree with. Okay? They basically protected their right against compelled speech by the government, by the state of California. By the way, compelled speech, if let's say your boss tells you, I need you to go up and give the opening remarks at this dinner or whatever, this benefit, and your boss tells you, you have to do it, and I'm giving you a personal directive to do it, and you say, no, I don't want to give the remarks, then he's perfectly entitled to fire you if you work for a private organization, because this is talking about the government, not talking about, your boss at the 7-Eleven or whatever the fuck you're doing. Not that there's a 7-Eleven operators convention that you'll be talking about or being flown to or whatever. So then the last one, a huge one that a lot of people are not talking about. Well, now it's getting a little attention, but it should have been probably the biggest story. Janus versus AFSCME. AFSCME is the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. And that decision basically it invalidates the requirement by state employers that non-union employees that work in positions that are collectively bargained by unions have to still pay union dues because the union negotiates their benefits and contract terms, their salaries, everything. So that is a major decision. I think that you could make the case on either. I personally am not a pro-union person, but I'm really not a pro-union person. I'm actually very much against unions in most cases. I'm not against people having the right to be in a union, but I'm against the effects of a lot of them. And the fact of the matter is that if you really think about it, that's another instance of compelled speech, because a lot of these unions, especially the National Education Association, NEA, and the American Federation of Teachers, but the SEIU, the AFSCME, AFSCME, they make massive political contributions to candidates that are almost always skewed to the Democratic side, to the side of frequently like radical Democrats. And a lot of people who might vote, let's say somebody works for, let's pick an organization like the sanitation department. So they might have no clue that, they're like looking at this record for who they contribute with, and they're like, I don't want to contribute money to these assholes. I don't even, first of all, a union traditionally was for collective bargaining. It was never for explicit political activism in the United States. In other countries, a lot of these unions have always been very political. But in the U.S., it's become more and more so. They've become linked increasingly with other causes that don't really have much to do with collective bargaining for workers. So I see this joke here. Iraq, Iran, and I think what was the other country? Saudi Arabia were all knocked out of the World Cup. The only Muslim country left is England. So that just popped up on my screen. Somebody's message board did it. So I just want to say, again, this article is mostly about the decisions and what the court said and the implications for them. Now, the losers, of course, are the liberal attorneys general and a lot of these activist groups, Planned Parenthood among them, that had been and by the way, also, some of these pro-gay groups in the case of the Masterpiece Cake Shop. These decisions are a massive blow to them, and they're taking it as if it's like the sinking of the Titanic or 9/11 or whatever. They're saying this is one of the worst. They are behaving as if this is the worst week in the history of I don't know, of having an abortion or being gay, when in reality, those things are not affected by the fact that the Masterpiece cake decision overturned simply that the specific case because the Civil Rights Commission abused this person's civil rights. So hypothetically, if they were to do it properly and somebody else was to go and file another complaint against this Jack Phillips guy, hypothetically, I guess they could come out winning. I'm just saying. But you also have the abortion one had nothing to do with the right of a woman to choose or not. It had to do with whether these not abortion centers, they're non-abortion providing pregnancy centers, whether they had to post abortion clinic information at their clinics. Okay, so there really is no abridgment of the right to choose in this case. It's very simple. They're just conflating it with everything else. But they will say, and people already are saying that this could lead to the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And I personally, I am a pro-life person, but I also think that making abortion illegal might actually lead to more dangerous abortions. So, I think people have to choose carefully about this. I would not support at this point in time overturning Roe versus Wade and making, in some states, let's say Kentucky, making abortion illegal. Because, in my opinion, the real solution is to defund Planned Parenthood, to get the federal government out of the abortion industry, and then people who do want to have abortions, they would still have the legal right to do so, but it would be at the behest of their own families, or their own choice or whatever, and that's it. Instead, the way it is today, the taxpayers indirectly fund abortion, and in some states, I believe that the state directly funds abortion, not the federal government. And that's not something I support. Now, in your state, let's say you live in a liberal state like Massachusetts, and you're fine with that. Well, if Massachusetts decides they want to throw money at Planned Parenthood, it's not my prerogative to tell them what to do. I don't live there, and I guess it's their choice, and they have to live with it, or celebrate it, I guess, in their case. So that's about it. I hope you guys do enjoy this. This was pretty short. Please read the article, share the article, comment on it, comment on the video, share the video, like the video, and we'll talk later. Check me out on Heavy Arms channel later during the patron stream for Derek Blackman.